The Hollywood industry is filled with million-dollar ideas that require multi-million-dollar investments, hoping to reach a substantial return in the end, at least according to the bigwigs. But then there are films that require smaller budgets that not only manage to make that money back, and then some, but also make a huge impact on moviegoers and the film industry as a whole. There are some examples of these films that have come out recently that I'd like to acknowledge in this video in regards to this topic. The first movie we're going to talk about is Iron Lung, which was directed by Markiplier, also known as Mark Fischbach, which is his real name. This film was actually budgeted and funded by his own pocket, and considering how big his YouTube channel is, it makes sense as to how he was able to afford to do that himself. But what's more impressive is the big return that he got at the end of it. Despite only putting about $4 to $5 million into it, he still managed to get back $51.2 million worldwide, which is pretty crazy. I mean, most of it kind of comes from the fact that he has a pretty dedicated fan base of... It makes sense as to why it had such a big return, because it has Markiplier's name on it. So even if it wasn't completely Oscar-worthy, people would still watch the films. But does that make the movie bad? Not necessarily. I think it's actually well done on its own. It definitely brings in the atmosphere that what you would expect from a horror movie. It does kind of take you out of it knowing that it is Markiplier playing the lead role, because you know how he is in his normal state in terms of his YouTube channel, but at the same time, it's hard not to be impressed with the production value that went into making the film and how big of a gross return that it got. And the best part about it is that despite most of it going through taxes, he takes home a good chunk of change. And that came from his own pocket and is going to go straight back to his own pocket, which obviously will be spread from everyone involved because he wants to pay everyone fairly, which, knowing the cool guy that he is, it makes sense as to why he would do that. But that's just only the tip of the iceberg. The reason why I only talked about this film first is because that's the first film that came out this year that had a small budget. Transitioning from that to the next film we're going to talk about is Curry Barker's Obsession. Obsession is made by yet another YouTuber named Curry Barker, who runs the YouTube channel of That's a Bad Idea with his friend Cooper. And they've been working with each other for years, so having a big breakout with a film like Obsession is a pretty big deal, especially knowing that it was on a $750,000 budget, which is pretty small, especially coming from a big studio such as Blumhouse. And nobody could have guessed that it would have made so much money despite it being such a small budget, of almost $500 million worldwide, which is a pretty big return and definitely warrants a success, mostly because of how well the movie is executed. I mean, the film is just your basic care for what you wish for story. Hell, the movie was based off a Simpsons episode, which was based off a book called Monkey's Paw. Basically, a guy finds a monkey's paw that grants him 3 wishes, but every wish that he makes, there's always consequences. And that's basically what Obsession follows in inspiration of that. But I think the reason why it's monumentally successful and why it has such a big impact is not just the creepy atmosphere or how well the performances are or how well written it is, but mostly comes down to performance of Indy Neuveret playing Nikki Flores. Her going back and forth between regular version of Nikki to Bear's wish version of Nikki, the way that he wants her to be, solidifies how the movie is going to be. It's creepy, it's unnerving, and it shows how toxic these people are in that fantasy part of the film itself. Also, when it comes down to is just how well advertised the film was. It does seem like your typical horror movie, and people like Blumhouse. I mean, I personally not a big fan, which is why I was kind of skeptical. But at the same time, it's hard not to deny how well advertised this film became when it all came full circle. And it deserves the success that it has. And for a long time before Spider-Man and another film that we're going to talk about later in this video became so profitable, shows that YouTubers can make great films because they have a brain that allows them to be creative. Curry Barker, long before this film even was a thing, had been creative in his own YouTube channel as proof of that. So he deserves that level of success, and he deserves the impact that has been brought upon in this industry as of late. And of course, we're going to talk about another YouTuber for this next film, The Backrooms. Before Backrooms was even a thing as a film, it was started as a 4chan post in 2019 of just a grainy photo of an empty room with yellow wallpaper, a damp carpet, and fluorescent lights. It became so popular. So much so as Kane Parsons took it upon himself to make an entire series on it on his own YouTube channel. And it became so successful over time that A24 walked up to his door and said, you want to make a movie about this? And he's like, yeah, okay. And considering how long this movie took, especially with such a small-ish budget of $10 million, I imagine it might have taken a long time. But not only does it impressively make $330 million at the box office, but it also made probably one of the youngest directors in Hollywood, or just on YouTube in general, to become a millionaire at the age of 20 years old. That's pretty crazy. Even the movie itself manages to be interesting as well, and shows a bright future ahead for such a young and talented director. I don't know if I can say much more about it other than just go see the film for yourself. It's that good of a film to watch, and I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it already. Now, low-budget animated films isn't entirely a new concept. We see it a lot on YouTube, even nowadays as of late. We see a lot of animated pilots. A lot of them have such a small budget and are independently made because people want to express their own ideas all over the internet, and it's a lot of fun to see. Flow has such a great successor story because, well, it was done on a small little animated software that anyone can access. And I've also heard rumors that it was done literally for no money, but based on what I've seen from the film, I don't think that's really true. And so I kind of looked into it myself, and I realized it was made on a budget of $3.7 million, which is smaller than Backrooms, but at the same time, that doesn't scream free to me. However, it did manage to make $57 million worldwide back, which is still a pretty big return. However, when you watch the film for the first time, you see like 20 different logos, so obviously that $57 million that they've grossed, it kind of spreads thin through each studio, which means each person gets a small percentage from what the film has made, which in of itself isn't a bad thing. They still walk away with about like 6 to 7 figures, so it's not entirely a bad thing. Because if anything, there's no voice actors in it, and there's just mostly animal noises and a bunch of sound all throughout the film. So if anything, it's one of those rare moments where the creators of a film get all the return instead of giving it to any voice actors because they don't have any. It not only made this much money, but it also beat out a bunch of other multi-million-dollar animated films that were on the lineup of the Oscars this year. Like even Zootopia, which cost like over $200 million, still lost to this film, which I think is pretty interesting. Probably one of the biggest question marks in movies that have low budgets but have a high impact in the industry as a whole, and basically the reason why I even made this video in the first place, was an animated film made in China called New Lie. Believe it or not, this film, what you're looking at, is somehow a profitable film. It was made on the course of 5 years of filmmaking and animation from literally 2 people, a mother and her son. And it grossed close to $6.7 million. A mother and her son literally walked away as millionaires with one of the weirdest looking animated films of all time. But how? Well, word got out from people saying that this is one of the weirdest and most funniest, so bad it's good films they've ever seen in their life. And their word spread so far that people went out of their way to go watch this film in theaters and actually paid for the ticket, which allowed them about $6.7 million as an overall gross. And that's after $200 they spent on making the film over the course of 5 years, which is insane to me to know that something like this is just as profitable as this. But honestly, as baffled as I am, I can't be completely mad at that, because when you think about it, the fact that this made so much money is hard not to respect. And I also find it kind of odd how people laugh at this sort of thing. Like, I understand if you see a bad animated film, say something like Food Fight, which costs over $65 million to make and it looks like total garbage, or something like Rhapsody Street Kids that has A-list voice actors attached to it, and yet it's the most laughably bad animated piece of garbage that you've ever seen in your life. But then to see something like this that's made from only $200 and from only 2 people manage to make this much money, like, in the end, who's really laughing now? Like, the only ones who should be laughing are the ones that made the film that are literally laughing to the bank that are sitting on $6 million. So, like who's really getting the last laugh here when you really think about it? I just find that kind of funny and also kind of interesting, knowing that something like this has made the success that I honestly quite think it deserves, despite it being such a weird film. It's amazing how such a small idea can reach such a big impact when you advertise your films correctly. I think that's just something that Hollywood needs to learn. Not uber millions of dollars have to go into a film to be made a success, especially if you want such a big return. I guess sometimes in a way you just have to give just a tiny bit just to gain a little more, and it's not entirely a bad thing. When it really comes down to it, it's all about the impact of the film itself. It's not always about how much money has to go into it. And it's great to know that films like this in recent years show that you can be successful with your films no matter how little to almost maybe to no money that you put into it. It just goes to show that the passion of making the film itself matters more than how much money you put into it. And showing these 5 examples that I talked about in this video exemplify why it's important to do that more often in this industry. And I think that's something that we should take into account, whether you work in Hollywood or you work independently. Whatever films you're going to make in your future, you know for sure you don't have to break the bank in order to make it. And these movies are absolute proof of that.